Everyone I talk to these days seems to be saying the same thing. I'm going to start small. I'm going to graduate into this whole wall printing enterprise. I'm going to start with a cheaper machine. I'm going to do focus on little jobs. And once I'm ready, I'm going to upgrade my machine to the VPG6, the DXon Jet, or the wall pen. And I have to say, no matter what printer you end up choosing, you want to make sure you choose a machine that's going to allow you to establish yourself as the business you want to be. So, what does that all mean? I think it's a massive misconception to assume that smaller jobs are easier to execute somehow. As a matter of fact, I'd go so far as to say small jobs, like 1 day jobs, I would consider a small job. Oftentimes, I refer to them as ice cream shops and coffee shops, things like that, are some of the hardest jobs that you can do. Just think about it in terms of how the day progresses. You have to show up, park, get situated, make sure you're set up. You hit print, you got all the optics on you that whole time. If you have any downtime, like if anything happens, any hiccup, you have tons of people watching you, sort of looking at their clocks, trying to figure out like what's happening, where's it going. You got no cushion for time. You got to execute that print. Then you got to pack up and leave. And it's very hard to do all of that in 1 day. Every single step. If you just can't find the right parking, it can completely throw off your schedule. There's lots of reasons why trying to accomplish a print in 1 day is actually significantly challenging. Another thing that I think along the same thread that is often true as a misconception is this idea that smaller jobs are easier to sell. I think that really speaks to a lack of situational awareness about the way that budgets are allocated. Small jobs, if it's coming out of my pocket, I have a totally different way of going about the decision emotionally and from a scheduling standpoint than if I'm managing a budget for something I think my company needs. Two completely different mindsets. And I don't think it would be very hard to convince you if you're watching this. Actually, the person who's running another budget is significantly easier to demonstrate value to than the person whose dollars you're prying from their cold, dead hands of, I'm, really running a budget. I want to make sure this is going to work. So when you think about it, generally speaking, I really truly can't stress this enough. Thinking small and acting small in the sales side of things is actually harder. You're going to find it a much more challenging thing to accomplish. Is setting up 20 small jobs is way harder than one big job. Now, I get it. It seems like there's a lot more small jobs around. Actually, I think given how broad and blue the ocean is in this wall printing space, there are so many clients that haven't even heard of this, given you're going to be introducing this concept to them anyways. Meaning, if you've talked to me before on the phone or we've done a call, I often say it's like the challenge here is that no one's actually heard of it before, right? You're starting from square one. You're educating the market on what wall printing is, which means you can't just take your piece of it. If you're a plumber, people know what plumbing is. They know why they need them. And they just are basically trying to decide who in their area they're going to use. None of that really applies here. Nobody's like in the business of wall printing because no one knows what it is. So there's a heavy degree of hands-on education element to the sale that, like, why would it be easier or harder this bigger the job? Why would one be harder than the other? The only real answer is like, they're not going to trust you with $100,000 budget if they don't trust you know what you're doing, which is kind of a different question though, right? That's a different trust building exercise. So my point being, a lot of people kind of come into this, and I think especially the first time business owners, I think it's pretty clear when I talk to people whether they've done a business before, depending on whether or not they have this idea in their head that, like, I'm going to buy a cheaper machine, I'm going to start with small jobs, and when I'm ready, I'm going to upgrade my business. And unfortunately, I just think that is a massive fallacy in assuming that will work. Once you start with the small jobs and you start with a small machine, it doesn't translate to what we're doing with the big machines and the big jobs. And I'm going to put that in quotations. These are not like significant investments necessarily. If you've run a business before and I tell you that it's a $50,000 upfront to get started with this business, you would laugh because that's actually relatively inexpensive, all things considered. Not many businesses can be set up for 50 grand or less. Especially not one that'd be a local service business. Typically your equipment costs, your upfront costs are significantly higher. But really what you should be looking at is not the upfront cost. That's not really what we're saying. And not the upfront effort. That's not really what we're saying. What you should be evaluating is what are the necessary steps to get a sustainable business, and what even is a sustainable business for you and what you're doing. Now, here's my caveat. If you're stepping into wall printing and your idea is to make this a side hustle, like I'm not going to be doing this full time, I just want to be a weekend warrior, a couple $1,000 on the weekend sounds great and I'm interested in doing that. By all means, spend on whatever machine you think. But remember, you're going to be playing in that space. That's where you're going to be doing. You're going to be sampling the $1,000, $2,000 jobs, which is totally fine. Nothing against that. Great thing. There is so much opportunity over here with the big business in the commercial space, major projects. That's why we ended up building the VPG6. So if you saw recently, we've launched our own printer. It's all about reliability. It's all about speed. And for 50 grand, you can get started and start bidding on 5 and 6 figure contracts, knowing that you have a machine that's going to allow you to succeed in that space. And that's really, like, I think, an important distinction here of when you're setting up, ask yourself what is more important to you, the upfront capital or the rate at which your ROI is capitalized. That, I think, is really the critical measure of whether or not you have a good perspective and whether you're going to succeed in this, is how you view the velocity of your ROI. If you knew you had to put more up front, but it got you to your ROI faster versus less upfront and it took longer to get that ROI, that's how you should break your categories on how ready you are to step into this business. If you are trying to stay small, plan on staying small, but it's very hard to picture that as a stepping stone into this other business. It's a different mentality. It's a different way of approaching the jobs. And it's going to be necessary to make some shifts in how you're allocating budget and how you evaluate margins. A little bit more of an advanced job and quoting perspective in the bigger scope. By bigger scope, to be clear, I mean 5 or 6 figure contracts. You're really looking for anchor tenants. You're looking for, I wouldn't call them whales. You're just looking for decent size scope in a space where, having done the printing, you can get more printing. So either that's in a great industry in the commercial sector whereby you can leverage one job into another job. So let's say it's a HVAC industry. You can take one HVAC company and then turn it into multiple HVAC companies that you're printing for, or it's one big anchor tenant. Like if you've seen our podcast with James and the university, that can be repeat business over and over again. It really is it's as simple as getting 20 $1,000 jobs, if not easier. My advice, if you're serious about this business, is to focus on the mid to large size contracts and see if you can land any sort of conversation, meeting, any discussions whereby you can go grab that. Right this second in the industry, nobody is approaching that. It's still such a new technology. Nobody's even heard of it. Right now, you have free reign to go pitch them an idea they've never heard and have the opportunity to get into some larger things. So my advice, if you're thinking about stepping into it, is rather to say, if I can get the 50 grand, if I can get the necessary upfront capital to get into this business, I can buy the tools that allow me to build a business that scales to a very real enterprise where I can get it. If I stay in the small space, very likely I will remain in the small space. And unfortunately, from a lot of what I've seen, will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have created a situation where the smaller machine is harder to execute. It's slower. So which means everything that you do requires more effort, more time, and you get less money for it. I think you're going to find that, like, it is a safe way to not succeed is essentially how I would look at that. So I think that's basically, don't use the cheaper machines as a stepping stone. Really sit down and ask yourself what kind of business you want. And if you want more information, I highly recommend checking out our course. We talk about front loading your sales before you even invest in the equipment. I think that's the best way to find out if you're going to succeed in this space. Get out there and try selling. Our course covers how to get through to your first sale without a machine. That's the whole purpose of it. I'd be happy to hop on a call with you. So click those links below. Get in touch with us. I'd be happy to kind of talk you through this and see what your business is based on where you're located, what your experience like. Anything we can do to help, we try to. So click those links, and would love to hear more from you.